Welcome back to this month's vlog. Since it's February, I thought we'd talk about love, the emotion of love and what it does to our physical bodies. So for many people, we often just think about our emotions and our minds as very separate from our physical body. But the reality is there is no separation. What we think influences what happens in our physical tissues, and what happens in our physical tissues influences how we think and behave. So it is incredibly important to understand the dynamics behind emotions. Emotions and emotional intelligence is about understanding how you experience particular emotions and then knowing what to do with them so that you are effective in dealing with them. So for this month, let's talk about love. Anytime we have any emotion, it elicits a chemical, electrical, and vibrational change in our chemistry and our atoms. Love is no different. In fact, there are certain key pieces of chemical changes that happen in love that are really unique to helping us pair up and bond. So here's one. We smell our mates. We identify them by scent before we even know that they're going to be our person. Part of how we end up bonding with them is because the smell of them creates a chemical change in us where we recognize that what they have to give us on an immune system antibody response is something that will benefit our body biologically. What that's called is our major histocompatibility complex. Basically, these are genetic pieces of us, and they're cells within our body that are antigens. They're pieces of us that can tell what belongs to us and what doesn't belong to us. The more varied this system is, the more healthy we are and the more robust our immune system. So when we are looking to partner with another person, we are looking for another MHC that is compatible with us, but also will expand our varied ability to have a more robust antibody and antigen immune system. So if you think that, man, they just smell really good, you're right. Here's another one that we use all the time in relationships, whether it be with our pets, whether it be with other people on the street, whether it be with close people or our mates. We look in each other's eyes. And part of why we do that is because when we look in each other's eyes, we get oxytocin dumped into our system. So this hormone allows us to bond and helps us with our boundaries, both psychological and physical, but brings us together in such a way that allows us to come together knowing that this is my person. This person I can trust. This person belongs to me. This person is here for me. It bonds us together. It's part of what happens when we have children, and it bonds and attaches us to our children. It does the same thing with other humans and other mammals, really. So when we look in each other's eyes, we get dumped with this oxytocin, and as a result, we feel content and happy. So next up on our list is cortisol. So while we're in the initial phases of attraction and relationship, our cortisol rises. Part of what this does is create some of that anxiety and stress that we feel that kind of drives behind some of those intense feelings that we have. Some of this is thought that maybe we're worried about losing our partner or just kind of worried in general about things changing and going on. But the other key pieces that it impacts are our blood pressure and our blood sugar. It increases both. And so that's part of why our body feels a little out of sorts when we're first falling in love with someone else. Now let's talk about adrenaline. So this is another piece that happens as we get involved with someone else. Our adrenaline rises. This is the hormone behind our fight and flight system. It's part of what creates that increased heart rate. It dilates our pupils so we can see better. We get a little bit stronger, a little bit faster. We're a little better at noticing differences in our environment. We get more focused and honed in. Part of that is because we're getting so excited and there's a dump of dopamine that happens. Vasopressin also helps with that, where it drops and helps our dopamine come up. Dopamine, again, is going to be all about us feeling great and engaged and excited and having pleasant experiences. So together, this combination between some of the bonding hormones, adrenaline, and now dopamine create this incredible feeling that we feel when we're first falling in love. our heart is racing, our breathing is increased, our muscles feel a little bit stronger. And again, we're just more in the moment, more focused. It's important and part of why we feel such excitement when we're falling in love. That sympathetic nervous system is really activated. Next, let's talk about dopamine. So dopamine is part of the craving and addiction cycle. It's part of our drive to repeat pleasant activities over and over and over. When we're falling in love, dopamine gets loaded into our system, partly because of some of the other hormones like vasopressin and adrenaline that are also coursing through our system, but partly because it's such a pleasant experience. We enjoy that feeling. And as a result, the brain says, do this again, do this again, do this again. Part of what dopamine brings for us is that pleasant feeling, is that excitement. Again, it helps us focus in, it helps us pay attention, it helps us be present, and it helps us truly, truly, truly want to be in that moment over and over. But it also leads to some sleeplessness, maybe those thoughts racing through where you can't focus on anything else but that partner that you're engaged with. Dopamine also creates more focus on our goal action-oriented behavior. And so as a result of feeling more dopamine when we're falling in love, we have more of an action-oriented goal plan to connect with this other person over and over and over again. So dopamine really helps us stay in that honeymoon phase of falling in love and makes sure that we continue that process. Now let's talk a little bit about serotonin. So serotonin is that neurotransmitter that helps us feel content. It helps us feel just pretty satisfied and chill. However, when we're falling in love, we have lower levels of serotonin. And that's part of what drives our obsession. That's a link between some folks who have obsessive compulsive disorder are known to have lower levels of serotonin. Part of having a little bit lower level of serotonin as you're falling in love helps us obsess over that other person. And it contributes a little to that anxiety and stress that we might feel with that increased cortisol as a result of falling in love and being maybe worried or trying to figure out how we're going to keep and stay with that person. So a little bit lower serotonin keeps us from being on our toes and just kind of keeps us from feeling too content in that relationship and really helps drive some of the other activities and behaviors that we might do to stay connected because we're obsessed with that person for that period of time. Let's talk about testosterone. So testosterone plays a role when we're falling in love as well. And partly because in men, testosterone lowers, but in women, it goes up. And part of the reason for this is because it gives us some different behaviors than we normally have. We all have testosterone, just like we all have estrogen in our system. However, the levels of these different sex hormones change and are different between the male and female biological sex. So what happens as males have lower testosterone is they start to orient more towards one person and not quite so much in the lust and maybe seeking out many partners. And for women, as it raises it up, we start to have more of that, and including bringing in more possessiveness and jealousy for both sexes, partly, again, bringing us together to keep us maintaining those relationships and connections with each other. Just don't let the green-eyed monster ruin the relationship. Endorphins play a big role in our excitement and experience as we start to wane and wean off that dopamine kick in the beginning in that honeymoon phase of the early relationship status. So as our dopamine begins to wear down, the endorphins kick up. Now, endorphins are your body's own morphine. They're your body's own sense of just feeling contented and happy and sweet in that area of calm and coolness. Part of what they do for us is not only help regulate that dopamine as it wears down, it helps us regulate that anxiety that we might have felt earlier on in the relationship. And it helps, again, bring that sense of well-being, sense of calm, sense of connection to the relationship. This is moving us into a different phase of attachment and into more of a longer-term relationship pattern. Let's talk about some of the problems that we might encounter and things that are toxic to our love relationships. So on one hand, we have all this biochemical things that are happening in the body. But certain things will also be in the environment around us. And some things are toxic to the environment for love itself. Things like jealousy, things like multiple partners and adultery. Polygamy can be a problem for those who are not truly polyamorous. It can be an issue if somebody is threatened or feels unsafe. Those things will all tank out all these good hormones and neurotransmitters that we've been talking about. When you're thinking about being in love, because of its extra focus and its openness and its excitement, we also usually have increased creativity, increased experiences of the world around us that just feel alive and vibrant. These things are toxic to that too. They'll cut out that creativity. They'll cut out that ability to really feel engaged and alive in your environment. If you feel like you're only surviving in the environment because maybe of poverty or stressors like too many children to take care of, too many bills to pay, not enough food to go around, maybe not enough heat in the house. Again, multiple partners, multiple experiences where you're not connecting, and it'll be toxic to that relationship and destroy that seed of love that's beginning. Let's talk about self-love for a moment. So with self-love, it can be really important to remember that some of these same chemical changes that we experience with a partner, we also get when we really, really, really are connected to ourselves. And it's really important to have a lot of self-love, because part of that self-love also brings some of these great chemical changes in the body that help us with our intelligence. They help us with our communication. They help us with our other relationships outside of our own self. So it's not a cliche when we say you must love yourself first before you will find yourself in loving partnerships that make a difference in your life. Because if you love yourself fully, your sense of self-esteem, self-worth, and your connection goes up. And in order to increase those, we want to do things that challenge our confidence so that we over and over feel confident and proud of ourselves, that we feel capable in our environment, that we feel like we contribute. Things that really help us feel confident in who we are and how who we are is matching who we want to be in the world. Those things will contribute to dumping those chemicals into our system, raising our confidence, raising our self-esteem, raising our sense of self-worth, which then allows us to connect out into another partnered loving relationship in a much more deep, connected, authentic, and genuine way. And this helps our whole world. When we are connected to ourselves and connected to others, we are much better people in the world. And we are much more connected to all that is around us, including the environment and everything in it. This is important for our species. Because love is a biomolecular thing. It is seated in our limbic system of our brain, in that emotional center of the brain, in that center of relationship and connection. And it's also in our subconscious. The templates for our love patterns are in our subconscious. And they were handed to us by, typically in our early childhood experiences, watching those around us be in love, act in love, and that biochemical experience that we were being bathed in as we were in the environment with the two people who were in love. So it's important to think about what that might have looked like for you as you're building your template now as maybe an adult or a teenager. And if it wasn't healthy, get help. Just because you were handed a template that you don't like doesn't mean you have to keep it. It's easy. Well, okay, let me not say it's easy, but it is possible to do the work to re-template yourself towards a more healthy and vibrant, loving relationship pattern so that you can leave behind the past and leave behind the mistakes of your ancestors and those who handed you the template of love from early childhood. One of the reasons love is so powerful is because it dumps all those chemicals into our system and it raises up our vibration in our atoms. And what that translates into is better relationships overall, again, to the environment, to other people, to ourselves. But it also helps make sure that we are able and have capacity to deal with the negative emotions and experience in life. When you've got this buffer and this wellspring of all this positive stuff, when negative things happen, you're more likely to be able to respond to them in a way that's effective. communicating effectively, setting boundaries effectively. You'll have more capacity to respond rather than just react based on old patterns or out of fear or anger-based cycles. When you're stuck in fear and anger, guilt and shame, remorse, despair, regret, what you're stuck in is a very constricted and a very rigid place. That is not health, whether it's in a physical tissue or in a emotional tissue. Rigidity is always an illness. It always creates conflict and problems for us, either internally or externally. What we want is open, expansive, flexible ways of being in the world, both again with our physical tissues. The more open, expansive, and flexible we are, the better our body responds to everything around us in the environment. The more open, expansive, and flexible I am in my mental constructs and my psychology, the more capacity I have to deal with life every day on life's terms in healthy and effective ways that maintain relationships, maintain connection, maintain community. And all of that makes our world a much better place. So do your part today and help make sure that we continue to have great love in our environment. Enjoy.